The Kansas wheat fields stretched endlessly under a pale October sky, golden stalks swaying in rhythm with the prairie wind. It was 1943, and while the world burned in war, 17-year-old Tommy Brewster stood ankle-deep in harvest dust. Watching his father's tractor cough black smoke for the third time that morning, Tommy wiped sweat from his forehead with a dirt-stained sleeve. His hands were calloused from years of farm work, his shoulders broad from hauling feed sacks since he was 12. The Brewster farm had been in the family for 3 generations, 70 acres of stubborn soil that barely yielded enough to keep them fed. His older brother, Jack, had enlisted 2 years ago. They hadn't heard from him in 6 months. Down the dirt road, Tommy could see the Henderson place, twice the size of theirs, with shiny new equipment and a freshly painted barn. Old man Henderson liked to remind everyone in town that his son was a pilot, flying B-17s over Germany. Tommy's father never said much about it, but the weight of comparison hung heavy in the silence between them. That afternoon, Tommy sat on the porch steps of their weathered farmhouse, sketching in a worn notebook he kept hidden under his mattress. The pages were filled with drawings, diagrams of aircraft he had seen in newsreels at the Grange Theater in town. He drew wings at angles, propellers with modified blades, gun placements that defied conventional design. His mother called from inside. "Supper's ready, Tommy. Don't let it get cold." He closed the notebook quickly as his father stepped onto the porch, boots heavy on the wooden planks. His father's face was lined with exhaustion, eyes distant. "Tractor's done for," his father said quietly. "Can't afford to fix it this time. Might have to sell the back 40 just to make it through winter." Tommy's chest tightened. That land had been his grandfather's pride. "We'll figure something out, Pa." His father looked at him with a mixture of love and resignation. "You're a good boy, Tommy, but figuring things out don't change reality. This farm's dying, and I don't know how to save it." That night, Tommy lay awake in his small room, listening to the wind rattle the window frame. On his wall hung a single photograph. Jack in his army uniform, grinning wide, full of hope before he shipped out. Tommy wondered if Jack was cold tonight, if he was scared, if he was even alive. The next morning, Tommy rode his bicycle into town, 8 miles of bumpy road to Millbrook, population 1,200. He locked his bike outside the post office and walked to the library, a small brick building that smelled of old paper and floor wax. Miss Eleanor, the librarian, knew him by name. "Back for more aviation books, Tommy?" "Yes, ma'am." "Anything new come in?" She handed him a technical manual on fighter aircraft mechanics, donated by a retired Air Force engineer who had moved to Millbrook for the quiet life. Tommy devoured it at a corner table, copying notes and sketches into his notebook. He stayed until closing time, his mind racing with possibilities. On his ride home, he stopped at Miller's General Store. Inside, a group of men stood around the radio, listening to news from the European front. The announcer's voice crackled with urgency. Allied losses continue to mount. German fighters prove devastatingly effective against bomber formations. The need for tactical innovation grows desperate. One of the men, Mr. Patterson, shook his head grimly. "My nephew's a gunner on AB-24. Says they're sitting ducks up there, losing boys every mission." Tommy felt his pulse quicken. He thought about the diagrams in his notebook, the unconventional ideas that had consumed his thoughts for months. What if there was a way? What if someone listened? That evening at dinner, Tommy's mother set down a thin stew, apologizing for the lack of meat. His father ate in silence, the weight of their circumstances pressing down on all of them. Tommy pushed food around his plate, gathering courage. "Pa, I've been thinking about the war, about helping." His father looked up, confused. "You're too young to enlist, son. And besides, I need you here." Tommy swallowed hard. "I know, but I've been studying aircraft design. I have some ideas, real ideas about fighter tactics and modifications that could." His father's hand hit the table, not angry, just tired. "Tommy, please. We got enough to worry about without you chasing fantasies. You're a farm boy. That's what we are. That's what we'll always be." The word stung, but Tommy couldn't let go. What if I'm not just a farm boy? What if I could actually make a difference? His father stood, chair scraping against worn linoleum. Dreams don't feed families, son. Dreams don't save farms. Go to bed. Tommy lay in the darkness that night, his notebook clutched to his chest, refusing to let hope die. 3 weeks passed in brutal routine. Tommy worked the fields until his back ached, but every spare moment belonged to his sketches. He drew during lunch breaks, by lantern light after dinner, in church when he should have been praying. The ideas consumed him, a fire that wouldn't die no matter how hard reality tried to extinguish it. On a freezing November morning, Tommy made a decision that would change everything. He wrapped his notebook in old newspaper, stuffed it in his jacket, and rode his bicycle 23 miles to Wichita Army Airfield. His fingers were numb by the time he arrived, his face raw from wind burn. The guard at the gate looked him up and down with barely concealed contempt. A skinny kid in patched overalls and mud-caked boots, shivering like a wet dog. State your business. Tommy's voice came out smaller than he intended. I need to speak with someone about fighter aircraft. I have designs that could help win the war. The guard laughed, a sharp bark that cut through the morning air. You got designs, farm boy? That's rich. You know how many crackpots come here every week with miracle solutions? Beat it before I have you removed. Please, sir. Just 5 minutes. If someone would just look at... The guard stepped forward, hand on his billy club. I said beat it. Now. Tommy stood frozen, humiliation burning through him hotter than any cold. Behind the gate, he could see pilots walking across the tarmac, mechanics working on gleaming fighters. His ideas could help those men. He knew it with every fiber of his being. But the guard wasn't moving. Other soldiers had stopped to watch, smirking at the spectacle. Tommy turned and walked back to his bicycle, their laughter following him like knives in his back. He rode home in a daze, tears freezing on his cheeks, the notebook feeling impossibly heavy against his chest. When he arrived home, his father was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. Where were you? The fence in the north pasture is down. Cattle could have wandered onto the highway. Tommy couldn't find words. His father's eyes narrowed as he noticed the direction Tommy had come from. You went to the airfield, didn't you? After I told you to let this foolishness go. Pa, I just thought. His father's face flushed red. You thought what? That those military men would drop everything to listen to some nobody farm kid? That you're special somehow? You embarrassed yourself, Tommy. Worse, you embarrassed this family. The words landed like physical blows. Tommy's mother appeared in the doorway, worry etched across her face, but she said nothing. You want to help the war effort? His father continued, voice rising. Then work this land. Grow food for the troops. That's how people like us contribute. Not with some ridiculous drawings in a notebook. Tommy felt something crack inside him, but he lifted his chin. These aren't ridiculous, Pa. They're real solutions to real problems. His father stepped closer, voice dropping to something cold and final. Then why is no one listening? Tommy didn't speak to his father for 2 days. He worked in silence, hauling feed, mending fences, performing every task with mechanical precision while his mind screamed with frustration. The notebook stayed hidden under his mattress, but the ideas wouldn't stop coming. On the 3rd day, a military jeep rolled up the dirt road to the Brewster farm. Tommy was in the barn when he heard his mother's surprised voice. He stepped outside to see a young officer in a crisp uniform standing by the vehicle, holding what looked like Tommy's notebook. His heart stopped. The officer's name was Lieutenant Morrison, and his face was unreadable. I'm looking for Thomas Brewster. Tommy's father emerged from the house, suspicious and protective. That's my son. What's this about? Lieutenant Morrison held up the notebook. Tommy recognized it immediately, the worn cover, the newspaper wrapping now torn. Your son left this at the airfield gate 3 days ago. The guard was going to throw it away, but a maintenance sergeant saw the drawings. He brought it to his commanding officer, who brought it to me. Tommy felt his stomach drop. Here it comes. The official reprimand. Maybe even charges for wasting military time. But Morrison's expression shifted. He looked directly at Tommy with something that resembled respect. Son, I need to know. Did you design these modifications yourself? No help from engineers or technical manuals beyond basic reference. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, sir. All of it. Morrison flipped open the notebook, pointing to a detailed diagram of a fighter aircraft with repositioned gun mounts and modified wing flaps. This here. This angled deflection system for the .50 caliber mounts. You understand what this could do? Tommy's throat was dry. It would reduce recoil interference and increase firing accuracy at high speeds by approximately 18%. The weight redistribution would also improve maneuverability in vertical climbs. His father stared, speechless. Morrison closed the notebook carefully. High Command is interested, son. Very interested. We've been losing pilots at an unsustainable rate. Our boys are brave, but they're outgunned by German engineering. Your ideas, they're unconventional, wild even, but our aeronautics team thinks there's real merit here. Tommy felt the world tilt. You mean they actually looked at it? More than looked. They want you to come to Wright Field in Ohio. Work with our development team. Test these theories. If you're still rooting for this farm kid who refused to give up, take a moment and hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next is going to shock everyone, including the German High Command. Morrison extended his hand. What do you say, Mr. Brewster? Ready to help us win this war? Tommy looked at his father, whose face had gone pale with shock. Then he looked at his mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. He shook Morrison's hand firmly. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Wright Field was a different world. Massive hangars stretched across the Ohio landscape, the roar of engines constant, the smell of aviation fuel and hot metal everywhere. Tommy arrived with nothing but a borrowed suitcase and his notebook, now considered classified military property. The engineers treated him like a curiosity at first. A 17-year-old farm boy among men with decades of experience and university degrees. They called him Kansas in a tone that wasn't quite respectful. But Morrison had believed in him, and that was enough to get him through the door. The first week was brutal. Tommy worked 18-hour days, translating his rough sketches into technical blueprints under the guidance of senior engineers. His hands, used to farm tools, now wielded protractors and slide rules. He made mistakes, faced corrections, absorbed everything like drought-starved soil soaking up rain. But when they built the first prototype modification on AP-47 Thunderbolt, something magical happened. The test pilot took it up, came back down, and his first words were, "This bird just became a predator." The modified gun mounts reduced vibration interference by 21%. The repositioned ammunition feeds eliminated jamming issues that had plagued crews for months. Tommy's unconventional weight distribution improved roll rate without sacrificing stability. Within 3 weeks, High Command approved field testing. 6 modified P-47s were shipped to the 56th Fighter Group in England, stationed at Boxted Airfield. Tommy wasn't supposed to go, but Morrison pulled strings. You designed it, kid. You should see it work. The flight across the Atlantic was Tommy's first time in an aircraft. He threw up twice but never stopped grinning. Boxted Airfield was mud and tension. The pilots looked exhausted, haunted by losses that came daily. When Tommy arrived, they gathered around the modified fighters with skepticism carved into every line of their faces. Captain Zemke, the squadron leader, walked around Tommy's P-47 like a wolf circling prey. So you're the farm boy who thinks he can outsmart German engineering? Tommy met his eyes. No, sir. I just think we can fight smarter with what we already have. Zemke studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Kansas. Let's see what your brain can do against Messerschmitts. The next morning, December 5, 1943, 6 modified P-47s launched as escort for a bomber formation heading to Frankfurt. Tommy watched from the control tower, heart hammering against his ribs. The radio crackled with chaos. Bandits at 11 o'clock, multiple contacts. The sky erupted into a deadly ballet of tracer fire and screaming engines. Then Zemke's voice cut through. These guns are responding like nothing I've ever flown. I've got 3 confirmed kills. Repeat, 3 confirmed. Other voices joined in. Maneuverability is incredible. The modifications are working. By the time the fighters returned, the 6 modified P-47s had collectively downed 14 German fighters without a single loss. Tommy stood on the tarmac as Zemke climbed out of his cockpit, face flushed with adrenaline and something close to wonder. "Farm boy," Zemke said, extending his hand. "You just changed this war." The numbers were staggering. Over the next 8 days, the modified P-47s flew 7 missions. 40 German fighters destroyed. 2 damaged aircraft returned safely. 0 losses. Word spread through the Allied command like wildfire. Tommy's modifications weren't just working. They were delivering results that seemed impossible. Engineers from every airfield in England demanded the blueprints. Production facilities in the States went into overdrive, retrofitting entire squadrons with the Kansas system, as pilots had started calling it. On December 13th, Tommy was summoned to a briefing room he had never been allowed to enter before. Inside sat generals, colonels, men whose names he had only read in newspapers. At the head of the table was General Hunter, commander of 8 Fighter Command. "Mr. Brewster, please sit." Tommy's legs felt unsteady as he took a chair. The room was thick with cigar smoke and intensity. General Hunter slid a document across the table. "This is intercepted German high command communication, decoded 2 hours ago. I thought you should hear what they're saying about your work." He began reading, his voice measured. "Allied fighters have adopted new tactical modifications of unknown origin. Effectiveness has increased dramatically. Losses unsustainable. Request immediate technical analysis and counter-strategy development. Current engagement protocols ineffective against new American capabilities." The room was silent. Tommy felt the weight of those words settle over him like a blanket. General Hunter looked at him directly. "Son, you're 17 years old. You've never fired a weapon, never flown in combat, never set foot in a military academy. But you've accomplished what our best minds couldn't. You've made the Germans afraid." Tommy's voice cracked slightly. "I just wanted to help, sir. My brother's out there somewhere. All those boys are." Hunter nodded slowly. "We're awarding you the Medal for Merit, the highest civilian honor this nation can bestow. You'll also receive a position as Special Technical Advisor to the Army Air Forces, with full access and authority. Your salary will ensure your family never loses that farm." Tommy thought of his father, standing on that porch, telling him dreams don't feed families. He thought of the guard at the Wichita gate, laughing at a kid in muddy boots. He thought of every moment someone told him he was just a farm boy, nothing special, nobody important. But mostly he thought of Jack, somewhere over Europe, maybe flying with guns that now worked because his little brother refused to stop dreaming. 2 weeks later, Tommy stood in the Oval Office. President Roosevelt shook his hand, photographers capturing the moment. The farm boy from Kansas and the leader of the free world, united by the simple truth that innovation could come from anywhere, anyone. That night, Tommy wrote a letter home. "Pa," he began, "you were right about one thing. I am a farm boy, but maybe that's exactly what we needed. Someone who sees problems differently. Someone stubborn enough to believe impossible things can grow, just like wheat in stubborn Kansas soil." Spring 1947. The war had been over for nearly 2 years. Tommy Brewster stood in the main assembly hall at Boeing Aircraft Company in Seattle, watching workers install his latest design modifications on a prototype passenger aircraft. He was 21 now, no longer the skinny farm kid, but a young man whose name appeared on patents and technical journals across the aviation industry. His office overlooked the production floor, walls covered with blueprints and photographs. One photo held pride of place on his desk. Jack in his uniform, standing next to Tommy outside the Brewster farmhouse. Jack had come home in late 1944, wounded but alive, and the first thing he did was crush Tommy in a hug that lasted 5 minutes. The farm was thriving now. Tommy's salary had allowed his father to buy new equipment, expand the land, hire help. But more than that, it had restored something broken in his father's spirit. Last Christmas, his father had framed Tommy's first notebook page and hung it in the living room, right next to Jack's medals. A knock on the door pulled Tommy from his thoughts. Captain Zemke walked in, now a celebrated war hero giving lectures across the country. He had made it a point to visit Tommy whenever he was in Seattle. Still changing the game, Kansas? Tommy grinned. Trying to. These passenger planes have potential we haven't even scratched yet. Zemke settled into a chair, his expression turning serious. I spoke at MIT yesterday. Told them about you. About how a kid with a notebook and stubborn faith saved more lives than anyone will ever be able to count. You know what those engineering students asked me? What's that? Where can we find more Tommy Brewsters? I told them they don't need to find you. They need to be you. To believe their ideas matter, even when the world says otherwise. Tommy felt emotion tighten his throat. He thought about that freezing November morning at the Wichita Gate, humiliation burning through him. He thought about his father's words, "Dreams don't feed families." He thought about every obstacle that tried to stop him. The German High Command never published what they really said when they analyzed the Kansas system modifications. But Tommy had seen the full decoded reports. One line stayed with him: "We underestimated American ingenuity. We prepared for their industry, their numbers, their resources. We did not prepare for a farm boy who refused to accept limitations." Tommy looked out at the assembly floor, at the future taking shape in metal and innovation. And that's our story. If it moved you, if it reminded you that extraordinary things can come from ordinary places, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're from and what dreams you're chasing, and subscribe to this channel for more incredible true stories. What should I cover next? Let me know below. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't manufactured in a factory. Sometimes it's born in the stubborn heart of someone who simply refuses to quit.